Hello, hello.
Hi, everybody.
I actually do have the matching Duncan socks. No, I'm kidding.
We did have socks too, so I'll send everyone a link later to buy them. It all goes to charity.
Yeah, as mentioned, my name's Matt Goynes, and super pumped to have Travis in front of you guys. I think, it's not very often we get some, killer brands like this and a big leader in the marketing space like Travis. So we will have a Q&A session. It'll be fairly limited at the end. So save up those good questions. And yeah, this will be fun. So Travis and I connected, and we're trying to figure out what type of agenda we wanted to talk about. And we mentioned, like, as we start to grow and get older in this industry, we want to pull in things that we're passionate about. And one of the things Travis is passionate about is targeting. As geeky as that sounds, but he's passionate about changing targeting because we've gone from a reach-based model now to very segmented audience approach. We start to think about with data moving away, how do you do that? So love to hear from your mouth, Inspire, how y'all look at targeting.
To say I'm passionate about targeting might be a bit hyperbolic. I'm passionate about animal rescue and queer rights, but targeting is good too.
It's all connected.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's all there. So yeah, I mean, we were talking, like, I think especially in our industry, so my background is tech. So I was at Uber before this, Vayner, Twitter, kind of, so I've been much more in the industry of kind of one-to-one and kind of micro targeting. So it was a little bit of a shock whenever I came into the QSR space because it's very reach based from what I could kind of see. But what we're doing is we're just starting to move away from this idea of reach being our planning KPI as well as our measurement KPI, but moving to a place where we're not getting candidly as creepy as tech can be, right? Because I think that we on the tech side had so much data, so much information about users that sometimes it was just a bit much and we went a bit too far. So it's starting to pull back a little bit and thinking, like, what are those 7 to 8 different segments, right? Like within each of our brands that have enough scale that warrants us to be creating bespoke content for them, but pulling it back a little bit so that we're getting a little bit more of the art back into this versus just the science side. So it's getting back to comms planning. It's getting back to this idea of what are the need states of consumers, right? Like, what are their barriers? What are they wanting to hear from brands? Where are they actually wanting to hear from brands? So we have to map that out and do audience planning. And then that becomes our target, right? Like, and we're having almost build 6, 7x more plans than we were before when we were doing reach-based buying. But I mean, we're already seeing the effectiveness completely outweigh any sort of increase, in production cost or targeting CPMs or any of that. So that's like the journey that we're starting to go on. I don't know how far that goes, right? We'll start to understand what is that level of diminishing return. Maybe it's 8, maybe it's 12, maybe it's 20. I don't know. We'll test and learn going into that. But yeah, that's how we're thinking about, targeting and kind of pushing beyond reach-based buying and planning.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And, on behalf of the marketing industry, thank you for that. I mean, how often have we come across plans that are age 18 to 24? That's the targeting. And, not all 24-year-olds are created equally. I think the catch 22 is, how do you scale that? I mean, that's a marketer's dream, is the right message at the right time to the right audience, et cetera. You mentioned the 7 to 8 audiences, how micro is too micro.
Yeah, and that's it. Like the scale has to be big enough, right? So these aren't audiences of like 1,000, 2,000. It's still scale of hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people. Because I would love, honestly, to be able to do more, but we can't afford it. Production, the more that we get granular, the more we're going to have to pay for content. And funds aren't increasing, right? If anything, funds are decreasing across most brands. So we have to just be smarter about it. So, I mean, I think for us, I mean, when you look at my team on the Inspire side versus if you look at my team in past jobs on the tech side, my planning teams are pretty large, and they have to be, right? Because they have to be thinking about the human being behind the plan versus just putting everything out into the ecosphere and letting the algorithms do everything. Algorithms are great for optimizing, but we can't utilize that from a planning component. So it's just a balance. It's going to cost more. It's going to cost more in production. It's going to cost more in FTEs to do really good planning, but you have to make that commitment.
Yeah, and I'm sure with that, you get so much more data. I mean, if you're really breaking down plans to be as dynamic and segmented as 7 to 8 different segments by every plan, you're getting all sorts of different learnings.
Well, yeah, and that's the thing. You have to have a learning agenda attached to every single one that's going out. And the cool thing about us is my team works across the entire portfolio. So if I see one particular audience who's working really well with Duncan, and that audience is also a priority for Sonic or B-dubs, I can actually take those learnings and kind of push them cross-functionally, because that's the cool thing I think about us anyways, is we're not siloed by brand. It's basically a hold code that allows for all of us to be looking across the brands. We see sales numbers of all the brands every day. We see performance every single day. We see what's working, what isn't. So we can take those learnings and scale them pretty easily too, but only whenever we have true learning agendas attached to everything that's going out there.
That's great. And I definitely want to come back to that because I think it's cool how you utilize that to your advantage. But going back to the targeting and segmentation piece and creative piece, how do you pair your creative with those specific? Because, obviously 7 to 8 different segments across multiple different brands within your portfolio. That's a lot of creative production. And when you're thinking about, let's just say you have a male 24 who's a vegan who goes to Arby's, and a male who's 24 who's a meat lover.
Yep.
Show me the meats, right?
Yeah. You've got the meats.
How creepy is creepy with creative? I mean, are we calling out the vegan and saying, "Hey, vegan, we have vegan options"?
I mean, I think with that example, I don't know how many 24-year-old vegans are going to Arby's specifically. I actually don't know what we could sell them. But I think what we would look at that would be scale, right? Like, and if there are enough 24-year-old vegans who are going to Arby's, I mean, there's a need for it, right? There's a purpose for them coming to the brand. So because the scale is large enough, I'll speak to them about being a vegan and how Arby's can break down that barrier, can fulfill that need state, right? But if it's 20 people, then no, right? Like it's creepy and it doesn't actually help us, right? At the end of the day. So I think that you just have to look at scale. And if you have a right to be a part of the conversation.
That's great. And I know we kind of talked about, with device IDs, cookies going away, and, the industry's kind of been saying, content is king once again, creative is king once again. I know you have a big focus on creative. So talk to us a little bit about, how you said you were being purposeful with creative.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's also this mentality of being able to create a couple of videos, just kind of cut them and put them everywhere. We really look at where consumers are consuming content, and we make it relevant, right, for that particular consumption moment. So if someone's watching TV, whether it's Hulu, whether it's, like Fox, that's okay to put a 15 there. That's okay to put a 30 there, because you're in this moment where you're expecting something not to be skippable. If you're on your phone and you're just kind of swiping through, a couple social platforms, I'm not going to force that, because I think you actually have the ability to erode brand equity through those things versus actually increase it much more easily. So I think we have to think about the moment, and this is why audience planning is so important, when and how and where they're going to be consuming that content, and making sure that that content is relevant for that particular placement. But we also can be efficient about it. We know that we're going to need vertical 6s. We know that we're going to need vertical 10s. So let's make those bespoke to that versus just taking, a 16:9 and trying to cut that down. it's just bringing an iPhone to set, and just pushing our creative agencies to think differently, but then also leaning on our partners to think about content creation for their platforms as well. Like I know our Snap team is here and they're incredible, whenever we're like, we want to be doing stuff on the platform, we need to be like on the platform, this is where our audience is, I just don't have creative. We can lean on partners, right, to like help us with that, to either create it or, use what we have.
That's awesome. And yeah, I think a lot of marketers don't look at the negative aspect of messaging and putting the wrong message out there. You mentioned, eroding brand trust. And I think the old saying is, what's the hardest thing to gain, but the easiest thing to lose? Trust. And I think that applies with the consumers as well. So yeah, that's really interesting.
Well, it's also, you think about, moments like today, honestly, like after like the horrific events yesterday, like consumers don't really want to hear from brands right now. So you also think about like when and where you should be showing up. And, for us today, we're not online, right? Because we don't think that it's our moment to be speaking to consumers, because there are bigger things, right, that we need to be talking about and dealing with. So it's not only the consumption place, but it's also the time, and making sure that, you're not overstepping in that particular moment.
Yeah, that's a great point. And, also I liked what you said about looking at specific inventory types and inventory formats and then pairing creative with that. Looking at where attention is being spent, time spent. You have channels like Hulu where, maybe average time spent is 45 minutes. Yeah, that's a great fit for longer form content. I can't tell you how many banner ads I've received or videos I've received and content that I'm just maybe checking the weather and getting in and out. I think we as marketers, we have to push the industry to change and to start thinking like that. But, also if you think about it from the creative space, there really hasn't been any innovation in creative sizes. I mean, we still use the standard IAB sizes, the 300 by 250 to 728 by 90. Mm-hmm. It's like, come on, guys, we're better than that. Yeah. Please, yeah. Can we do something different?
And I think that's where it's on us to be better marketers, in the sense of, all of our, our MMMs show that, that tiny little, mobile display banner at the bottom of the screen is working. It's hard to rationalize that, but the data says it is. So I think we just have to be smarter whenever we have tiny real estate like that. Just make it a branding unit, right? Like for us, it's just like donuts, right? Iced coffee, like close up of like a chicken sandwich, right? Or the new like Arby's, we just launched a Wagyu burger, like it's that, right? And it's just like a reminder and a frequency play versus like a banner that's like half legalese, that's trying to drive people to like a really shitty mobile experience. We just have to be smarter with those units that we have at our disposal versus just thinking that tiny little mobile banner can work the exact same way as something up here.
Yeah, I like that. Let's use what we have, but make it work for us. And how many times have we seen those little pencil banners and we tried to like zoom in and see what the caveat or the exclusion is, but Duncan, I love that.
Yeah, just like branding. It's like rethinking what have been traditionally direct response units as new forms of marketing, right? And messaging, and rethinking how this becomes more of a DR experience, right? Versus in the past, it's been much more brand. We have to, I think, turn everything on its head, now.
I love it. Now, going back to what you were talking about earlier, which is, being within Inspire and being, managing a portfolio of brands, almost like a holding company. Back in the day, I worked at Expedia, I worked at hotels.com and marketing, and we would leverage data from Travelocity and Expedia.com and, all the different companies that we owned under that umbrella. And we would use that to market, cross-sell, upsell. If you bought a flight on Expedia, hotels.com would re-message you with, hotel ads. So talk to us about within your CDP at Inspire, how are you using the data and the audiences from the different brands? And then how are you cross-selling, upselling those customers?
Yeah. So, I mean, like I said, this industry is very new to me still. So I'm still even learning how the industry works. But my assumption was, you have these like kind of holding companies of restaurants, and all the restaurants are talking, and, everyone's kind of like one family. I'm finding out that's not true. And even whenever you're in one holding company, they're not speaking. But that's what I love about like what we're doing. So basically we're creating a single CDP that will house all of our consumers across all of our brands. We've been very deliberate with the acquisitions that we've made so that they're not cannibalizing on each other as well. So when you think about it as a day part strategy, from waking up in the morning to going to bed at night, there's a brand that you can kind of follow throughout the day. So first, we just need to get everything on a single CDP. We bought brands very quickly. 4 years ago, Inspired didn't exist. Now we're the second largest restaurant group, which is crazy. But so it's singleizing everything within the CDP, but then that's where the power starts to go in. Is one, we need to get that across the board, but then how do I think about someone who goes to Dunkin', 4 days a week, right? I know that they're a loyalist. I know what they buy. If I can push them over into one of our other brands, like, and this is long-term stuff, right? Like not in the near term, but like their LTV is naturally going to go up. If I can give them an offer to get to go Buffalo Wild Wings, once a month, they're much stickier to us, right? They're more valuable as a consumer. We can create an experience for them that allows for them to stay within this ecosphere. So that's what I'm excited about, right? Is this single CDP that can then deploy across the entire portfolio.
And I think we should all try to be like that. I know when, I've worked for larger companies like that, there's a lot of walls set up between the companies and everyone's trying to prove themselves out, and you don't necessarily want to share data. So I think one of the ways you mentioned, which I'm sure there's more ways, but one of the ways you break down those barriers is everyone on your marketing team and planning team works across all the brands.
Yeah, I mean, there are very few people on my team who are brand dedicated, so what we're doing is we're seeing what's working for one brand, whether it be with a specific partner, specific test, specific audience, and then we're scaling that. Like we had something that worked really good from a reward standpoint, like with a partner. I think they're actually might be based in Chicago, but Fetch, and like it's working really well. So we're like, immediately I send that out to all the brands. I'm like, this is working well, let's scale this super quickly, and we're able to share that and move super quickly without the fear of sharing too much. So the nimbleness, right, and the exposure across the portfolio and the integration with a planning and a buying team who's looking cross-functionally, we're doing this like every single hour.
And I'm sure sharing your losses too, like what
Totally
didn't work, what failed, so they don't do.
Because if they're not failing, they're not doing their job, right? Like, and I want us to fail, I want us to learn, but if I can do that on one brand instead of 7 brands, like that makes my life much more easy.
I'm gonna save that quote. If you're not failing, you're not doing your job.
But it's true. And I know so many people say that, right? And I've been at companies in the past where you're like, what's this, like, fail fast, fail hard, or whatever. But no one actually encourages it. Like, and if everything is just rosy, something's not right. Like none of us are perfect. The industry is changing too fast. Ad units are changing. Targeting is changing. I mean, measurement alone, right? Like we're going into the upfronts this year and we're still like, okay, well, are we going to bring on iSpot? Is it ComScore? Like what's going on with Nielsen? Like the entire thing is disrupted. And if we're not failing with some of these tests, we're not doing something right in my mind.
And that's a great segue, obviously coming out of the TV upfronts. I'd love to get your opinion. What were your impressions of it? What were your thoughts?
I mean, my main thought was like, why aren't we having them? I just remember this moment. I was like sitting in like Radio City, like 6,000 of my peers, and I'm like, what are we doing? Like, we had this incredible opportunity to reinvent the way that we went into the upfronts, and it was the same thing, right? Like it was the same thing, but more confusing, honestly. Like I left that, I'm like, I didn't know what my takeaways were, versus like 3 years ago, at least I was like, okay, my takeaways are like, this is the programming schedule, right? I'm going to buy into this because I want to get into this program. Everyone's talking about streaming, but no one in my mind had a clear view of how streaming plays into an integrated plan across a network strategy. I wasn't sure which shows were going to be network only versus streaming only versus both. I'm not clear how it's going to be measured. I'm not clear how it's going to be bought. Like, is it, everyone talked about programmatic, but is it PG? Is it PMP? Is it just IO, right? But it has to be bought in the upfront. It just left me with more questions, honestly, than I think it did answers. So yeah, I just think we had such an opportunity to do something different and reinvent that world. And I left a little sad that we went through that week, and for what? I mean, one of the networks, I won't call them out, but got us all in a room to virtually stream the entire upfront. Like, no one was in person. You're like, what are we doing? Like, I could have stayed in Atlanta. Like, so yeah, not to be like negative Nancy, but like, it was frustrating, I think, coming out of last week.
Yeah, I can see how that would be frustrating. And I think we've all heard that, CTV, streaming, OTT is the future. Cord cutters, cord nevers. Did they provide any sort of data or, facts around that? I know you're, largely based on proof data points, and how that fits into your overall, how does CTV fit into your linear planning and cable and everything else? So talk to us a little bit about that.
I mean, it's the natural conversation of like subscribers, right? Because I think that's what makes the most sense to the networks right now, is like as proof points of, we went from 10 million subscribers to 50 to 100. But I honestly don't know difference in content consumption, demo makeups, audience makeups from linear to connected, especially in a world where we're buying linear through like a data-driven linear model, right? So we're buying on a segment level instead of a demo level. It all starts to like blur together because I'm candidly getting the same targeting. So yeah, they didn't, in my mind, they weren't super clear on how the growth is happening outside of subscribers. I will say the one takeaway for me at the Univision upfront was they just were like hard on network, right? They're like, we're the only network that's actually growing double digits, So I'm like, that's cool, right? You have that's something I can like actually sink my teeth into, and I can lean in with you on that because I know that you have a captive audience that's actually growing, versus some of the others, it's declining, but then what, right? Like, is it linear that is declining from linear into streaming, or are they just going elsewhere? I think we need to get a clearer articulation of what's going on from a growth standpoint.
Yeah, you said a lot of important things there. And I think a lot of it combats a lot of misnomers in our industry, that you can't get targeted with linear. And, we have people migrating more onto these streaming platforms. And it sounds like you're saying is, hey, look, linear is not dead. It can still be a part of your overall media mix. And it can be just as targeted as, CTV and some of the streaming platforms where you're targeting and looking at exposure to a specific household who maybe has visited Arby's before, or Dunkin's, and even tracking that too, tracking linear.
Yeah, I mean, I do think there does start to become a little bit of a targeting disparity between linear and like CTV, but you can buy on segments, right? Like it's not easy. Like we partner with Epsilon to do it so that they're forcing the networks into allowing for the segment delivery instead of the demo delivery. But yeah, I mean, it's funny to even hear me say it because I'm a digital guy, right? Like I grew up as a digital planner on the agency side. I've worked at tech companies my entire career. I only started doing like more traditional stuff when I was at Uber. And it's odd to say, I'm like, yeah, linear is powerful. Like there's still a place for linear. Linear is not dead. We just have to be using it smarter, versus just looking at an MMM and saying, oh, TV works. Yeah, TV obviously works in MMM because an MMM is built to say that TV works. So how do we just use it smarter to still reach a huge, huge amount of people?
Say MMM 3 times fast. Yeah, so it sounds like as an industry, we need to provide more education about specific programming on streaming platforms. What that shift and migration is looking like, in order for brands to truly feel confident in testing that and moving towards that and shifting maybe more of the dollars.
Yeah, I think we're beyond this place of hunches, right? Like we're like, oh, we know people are there. It's like, give me numbers, give me even if more people are on streaming than they are linear, if they're not as attentive, right, or if they're not in the room, or it's something that's actually they're leaving on for longer, right, and it's not an attention metric I can actually grasp onto versus just a reach metric, I don't care. I care about my ads showing to humans who are actually seeing them in relevant and contextual places. So yeah, we need the data points to go into test versus, gone are the days of, like Quibi, right? When Quibi came out and like everyone just ran blindly throwing out the most ridiculous amounts of money with no proof points. And then I think everyone realized what no proof points meant. So yeah, we need something to kind of sink our teeth into before we go into some of these tests.
All right, bonus question, lightning round before we go into Q&A. When we think about targeting in the data-driven linear, the CTV space, maybe you're targeting a Arby's loyalist who's spent Arby's, I don't know, 10 times in the last year. Is there any waste? Is there any spillage when you're targeting that specific household that maybe you're not hitting that Arby's loyalist? You're hitting the person's, significant other or children. How do you guys kind of account for that? And
yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think the first is we don't forget about that person. I think a lot of brands, whenever they have like their loyalist who they know is going to be coming in over and over and over again, they're almost excluded because they feel like they don't need to do anything. I think we have a different strategy for people who come in very often versus people who come in maybe like twice a year versus people who haven't come in, like in 6 to 9 months. So I think it's just making sure that we're always top of mind to all of those people through different messages. And if someone else in the room sees that, then it's top of mind for them. It might not be quite as relevant, but at least they're still, getting exposure to the brand, which they wouldn't if we were taking advantage of that person where we're like, we don't need to talk to you. You're going to come no matter what, right? It's like, no, we just have to message them differently than, me who hasn't gone, for 6 to 9 months.
Yeah, that's really important. And I think we know, and when you think of like new home buying, new car buying, the spouse, significant other, extremely influential in that decision. So influencing them, touching them with creative messaging definitely makes a lot of sense. Well, thank you. We have 1 minute left, so we will open it up to a quick Q&A session. Any questions for Travis?
Can you give us a little bit more color and detail on what you would offer for your planning agenda?
Like our audience planning or learning agenda?
Your learning agenda,
Yeah. So, I mean, basically what we're doing with our learning agendas is we're coupling both brand metrics as well as conversion metrics across every single platform, as well as intersecting with every single audience. So we're not only looking at ROAS, we're not only looking at brand lifts, we're looking at both together. And if you're not hitting certain thresholds for both of those at that intersection level, then we know next time that those two coming together shouldn't be, kind of push moving forward. Maybe it's a different audience, maybe it's a different platform, but it gets to that almost like a grid format where thresholds need to be hit across all of our metrics for us to be able to utilize that same intersection moving forward. I have one plug so today is National Iced Coffee Day. And that's why we launched these shoes today for National Iced Coffee Day. But for every iced coffee that you buy at Dunkin' Donuts today, we're giving $1 to the Dunkin' Foundation, which is a really cool organization. So if everyone wants to go get an iced coffee today, for a good cause.
And if you all reach under your seats, I'm kidding. No one reached.
Yeah.
I think everyone knows. Thank you
Cool.
guys.
Yeah,
Appreciate
thanks,
it.
y'all.